Bentornati, and welcome back to Dwarf Fortress for Beginners, the series in which I teach you how to play Dwarf Fortress using mainly the in-game tutorials and guides, plus a few tricks I picked up in the last 10 years. This episode should have been trading part 2, but unfortunately at the time of this recording I'm still waiting for the elves to show up in one of my forts. So instead of covering the trading caravan, I decided I'm going to follow the next guide on the list, which talks about nobles and administrators, which is also a great opportunity to introduce the manager and automated work orders. So as always, let's begin by reading the in-game guide, Offices and Administrative Work. In order for some functions to be used, like work orders or bookkeeping, administrators must be assigned. To do this, select the Nobles and Administrators menu and click the Add button to assign somebody. Some administrators will require offices to perform their work. You can create these with Zones, Office. The zone you select must contain a chair, or you can paint a zone and place a chair later. Remember to assign the administrator to the office. Other nobles may appear or be assigned as the game progresses. Use the Nobles and Administrators menu to check their wants and needs. Alright, now let's follow the guide and unpack all this information. If you follow the previous guides, you should already be familiar with the Nobles tab, as you've probably used it to appoint a bookkeeper and a broker. Anyway, let's take a look by clicking the icon with the crown. This is how the list of administrators should look in the early days of a fortress. As the guide pointed out, as your fortress grows in fame and population, more positions either open up or get assigned automatically, so if your list looks different, that's probably why. Although some peculiar political situations may prompt the appearance of specific nobles earlier than usual. The only position assigned by default as you start is the one of the expedition leader. In our case, it was from the very beginning Cogsack Amembim. You can think of this dwarf as your avatar within the fortress in a certain sense. Your fortress can survive without a leader, so I can click on this and click on Leave Vacant. But as you can see, without a leader you won't be able to use this interface to appoint any other station. Because even if it's you deciding, he does the actual appointing. So let's assign the role back to our old expedition leader. It's also interesting to note that pretty much all the stations you see in this screen right now are actually more on the side of the administrators rather than nobles. The difference being that these have a function and can be assigned by you, the player. Nobles, real nobles, on the other hand, cannot be assigned or reassigned, nor they can be exiled, and they are literally supposed to be your bosses within the game. Contrary to what a lot of people think though, nobles aren't totally useless, as they provide an outlet for the other dwarves' frustrations. Stressed out dwarves will often seek out a person in charge and complain at them, which results in them feeling better afterwards. So let's now take a really brief look at the stations available here, and then we'll spend the rest of this video on an introduction on the manager and the manager screens. So right below the expedition leader we have the militia commander. The militia commander manages your military forces. Having a dwarf assigned to this position allows you to create and manage military squads. The sheriff. He's in charge of law enforcement. Having a sheriff allows you to interact with the justice systems, which involves interrogating witnesses and suspects and accusing dwarves of specific crimes that may come up, sentencing them either to imprisonment or physical punishment. As the fortress grows, the sheriff position is eventually replaced by that of captain of the guard, which has the same function. The hammerer is a fortress executioner. Hammering is the worst kind of punishment a member of a fortress can be subjected to, that is, without your direct intervention, and can result in the death of the citizen being hammered. Let's jump over to the chief medical dwarf, which manages your hospitals and allows for the health system to function, or not, as it seems this feature is affected by a few bugs as of version 50.04. The broker, as you should already know, is responsible for appraising the trading value of all the items in your fortress and dealing with merchants. Having a broker isn't strictly required to close the deal with a caravan, but item values won't be displayed if you don't appoint your broker. The bookkeeper takes stock of your fortress inventory, allowing for count precision of items that goes beyond the number 7. This is the only administrative task you can further customize by setting a desired accuracy level, with 1 being the lowest accuracy and 5 being the highest. I have mine set to 2 right now, which means that only the first 2 digits in any number will be somewhat accurate. So as you can see in here right now, it says I have roughly 170 items of food. If I were to set it up to 3, for example, it will count the actual precise number of food rations. And finally in here, or at least finally for now, we have messengers. They act as liaisons between the local government, aka you, and your satellite holdings. Assuming you have holdings, which means separate sites on a world map that recognize your authority, messengers can be sent out on missions to actively recruit more migrants. Apart from looking at the list and being able to assign or replace the dwarves in these positions, the other thing that you can do in here is look at what they require. Out of the starting administrative positions, only 4 have requirements. The bookkeeper, chief medical dwarf, and manager all require at least a meager study to function. As you can see in here, for example, our bookkeeper that I already have assigned says in here, needs a meager study, and I already gave him a meager study, so it's in green. Curiously, a sheriff, let's try and appoint a sheriff here, they have pretty high requirements to be an administrative position that is available from the get-go. As you can see in here, all of this is now highlighted in red because they need not just any study, they need a modest study, modest quarters, and a modest dining room. They are each represented by these different icons. So the study, of course, the bed is for the quarters or bedroom, and the cutlery signifies the dining room. Some dwarves, or actually more often than not nobles, will also require a tomb to be assigned to them. They may also require specific items of furniture to be installed in one of their rooms. For example, the sheriff here, to function correctly, or to be happy, we should say, needs at least 1 cabinet, 1 chest, 1 weapon rack, and 1 armor stand. I do not need a sheriff right now though, so I will go ahead and leave the position vacant. Now this is supposed to be only an introduction, so I'm not gonna get deeper than this into it. I'll just point out that these 2 extra icons are for mandates. It means that some of your nobles from time to time may require you to craft specific items, or may impose a ban on the export of certain goods. And if you don't do that, so if you don't craft those items within a certain time, or if you do sell the items that were banned to a caravan, they will get angry and they will contact the local sheriff to order some punishment to be dealt. Well, not to you personally, the player, of course, but to some of your dwarves. And that may result in dwarves getting injured. So do pay attention to this. Alright, now let's take a look at the manager. First of all, of course, we begin by assigning somebody to the job of manager. As always, the list is ordered, taking into consideration relevant skills. Our expedition leader, Cogsack, is deemed to be the most apt to this role because of his adequate organizer skill. So let's select them. And as you can see now, while the expedition leader doesn't normally require a study, because our expedition leader is now also the manager, Cogsack does require a meager study. But that's because they are now the manager, not because this suddenly became a requirement for the expedition leader. So let's first of all fix that. How do we create a study again? First of all, we need a chair. The only piece of furniture that is actually required for an office or study to function is a chair of any kind. So either a wooden chair or a rock throne. So let's place one of those. There it is. With the chair in place, we can go to zones. We can click on office and we draw a rectangle that does have to cover the chair. Click on accept. If we want, we can also name this the manager's office, for example. And most important of all, we now have to assign the zone to our expedition leader. There you go. Now the expedition leader is assigned. Let's remember, expedition leader and also manager is assigned now to this office that has a chair. Now, as the guide points out, you can do also the opposite. You can create the zone first. For example, I could come in here and create a totally useless office in here. The problem is, even if I were to assign this office to somebody, without chair, the office will not work correctly. So, do take care to have at some point a chair installed in the area of the office. Okay, let's take a look back at the nobles and administrators screen and check if the manager should be happy right now. Yes, the icon is green, and you can look at the top of the screen there where it says that they need a meager study, and apparently the office that we assign to them is enough to fill this requirement. Now that we have a manager assigned and they have an office in which to work, we can finally take a look at the amazing features unlocked by the position of manager. So we can now click on this icon here, which is the menu for work orders. This comes with its own help dialog, so let's read through this. It says, work orders are used to automate tasks in workshops. These work orders are set to complete a certain number of tasks and can be given start conditions. For instance, you can create an order to make wooden bins if you are out of empty ones, to brew drinks if you are running low, or to make 5 statues every month. You can limit work orders to a number of workshops. You can also create work orders at a specific workshop from their building sheet. The system is reasonably powerful, and you can eventually automate almost all of your production if you wish. That is a lot, and it's amazing. Before I even get into it, let me point out, work orders are very, very powerful and thus pretty complex. I'm not gonna say necessarily difficult or complicated. Once you understand the concept, you should be able to mess around and figure stuff on your own. However, because of the sheer amount of different items in this game, some tasks may prove to be harder to automate than others. You may have to correctly think about how you queue work orders one after the others. Anyway, before I jump too ahead, this is Dwarf Fortress for beginners, so I'm going to focus on a few things that you can play with to familiarize yourself with the system. To start, let's go back to a normal workshop and remind ourselves what a task is in the game. So this is a carpenter's workshop. If we click on it, we can click on add new task, and a single task can be, for example, make a wooden bin. You already have a few options on normal tasks. For example, this would make just one, but if you click on this icon, now this task is set to repeat infinitely, which means that dwarves will just keep making wooden bins, of course, until they run completely out of logs. Now, this might be exactly what you want to do, or most probably not. Most probably you want a specific number of bins to be created. Now, if you wanted like 2 or 3, you could get in and just click and click and click, but this becomes old really, really quickly. So, can work orders help us with this? Absolutely yes, they can. So let's remove all these tasks and let's get back in the work orders menu and click on the add work order icon. We are now presented with a very, very long list. These are all the different tasks that could be carried out in any workshop in a fortress. And it's everything. It's not even constrained by the workshops that you currently have. This is literally all the things that can be crafted. If you want, you can click on one of the workshop icons on the left and filter the list accordingly. For example, if I were to click on fishery for some reason, now I can see that the list only has catch live fish extract from raw fish and prepare raw fish, because those are the things that you do at a fishery. Whereas in a carpenter's workshop, of course, you have make wooden altar, make bed, make bin, and so on and so forth. Another way to find the task that you're looking for is to just click on all task or leave it as it is, and then click in here on the search bar and look for something like a bin if you want to make a bin. However, more often than not, you need to be pretty specific, because as you can see, a bin is also part of binding, and also many things can be made of a lot of different materials. How can we pinpoint a wooden bin? Well, wooden bin usually does the trick. Just a really quick tip for this search bar: if you're looking to make, let's say, a table out of stone, and you write stone table and say nothing, that's because the other and most used term for it is rock. So rock table is usually what you're looking for. So wooden for wood stuff, rock is for stone most often, and when it comes to metal, well, you just write the type of metal that you want. For example, gold something, or steel table, that's also a thing. Okay, let's go back to wooden bin and let's see what we can make with this. So if I now click on the item on the right section of the screen, I have created a new work order. This line represents the work order. By default, a new work order will be a one-time order for 10 of those items to be crafted in bulk. You can use these buttons on the right side of the screen to affect the number of items. For example, I can click on the minus and the number will go down. I can click on the plus and it will go up. Or I can click on the hash symbol and then type on my keyboard the exact number I want, for example, 4. The controls in the center of the line in here instead relate to how many workshops can be assigned to work on this specific work order. So by default is use any shop, which means no limit. You can again use the plus and minus. 0 in this case represent use whatever number you want. Let's try in this case to put in a number here and say 2 workshops. So what do we expect to happen? The manager will start working on this, which means that actually the dwarf that we appointed as manager needs to sit on his chair in order to validate this work order. And at that point, which by the way, it's going to happen really quickly, at that point we are going to see tasks being assigned to 2 separate carpenter's workshop. So let's take a look at that. Let's close this. Let's look at these workshops. For example, I will highlight the first one and let's unpause. Now, remember, I selected only 2 workshops to be used, so it might very well be that the tasks are being assigned to some other workshop. Oh, look at this, make wooden bin. Let's pause really quickly. So, first workshop is now selected, make wooden bin has now been automatically created in here. Let me click on the second one. Okay, we also have a make wooden bin on the second one. Click on the third. Nothing in here. So everything as expected. The manager has dispatched 2 separate tasks of making wooden bin to these 2 carpenters' workshop, and they will continue to do so until the required number of 4 wooden bins has been made. So let's unpause and watch as this unfolds. The second one has been completed. If we look again at the list, we can see that it says 2 out of 4 now. Third one completed. So now the list says only 1 out of 4 remaining. And as Dodok, the metal crafter, completes the 4th bin, we get a notification on the left side of the screen saying make wooden bin 4 has been completed. We can click on this, we can dismiss it. And now, if I access again the work order menu, there are no active work orders. So that was a one-time work order for 4 wooden bins. The wooden bins have been made, so that work order is complete and it's not in here anymore. Okay, so this really simple use on its own, it's pretty useful, because instead of going in a workshop and saying add new task, wooden bin, and having to click a million times, if you want 50 wooden bins for some reason, or 12 beds for all your dwarves, you can get in there and make a one-time order for everything in bulk. You can, of course, do stuff that is way more complicated than this with work orders, but I want to just show you how useful even one-time orders can be. For example, let's take a look downstairs. I prepared 12 separate rooms so that they can have personal quarters. Now, if I wanted to make these dwarves really happy, I could give them each a room with a door, first of all, a bed, of course, and then a cabinet and a coffer or a chest. Now, normally this would require me to get to a carpenter's workshop or a stonecutter workshop and manually queue all these things one by one. But now that I know how to use the work orders, I can get in here and say, I want beds. And I want you to make 12. Then I want rock doors to be made, 12. And then I want wooden cabinets to be constructed. You know what? 12 of them. And then a rock coffer, which is basically a stone chest. Please make 12 of those. Now, just for time's sake, I will reduce these numbers actually to 2, because I don't want to wait in here for 12 of each to be constructed, but I will leave this unconstrained on the number of workshops just to show you that the manager will do all the work for you and will dispatch these tasks to all the available workshops. So, okay, I've set it to 2 for each. Just for simplicity's sake, let's go back upstairs, unpause, and in a few seconds, we should see a bunch of dwarves stream in and start working on things. And the doors have been made, and the beds have been made. If I pause in here for a second and take a look in here, we see make bed has been completed, make rock door has been completed. I see cabinets, I see chests. Let's look in here. Wooden cabinets have been made, rock coffer have been made. That was incredibly quick and easy, wasn't it? Alright, now let's talk about something that is very important in every fortress and that it really warrants for some automation, and that is brewing drinks. Even though right now I have a number that is pretty safe for a population of 13, we all know that there's nothing wrong with having hundreds of drinks available. So let's back into the manager tab. In here, if I add new work order, I can say brew, there it is, brew drink from plants. However, instead of saying do 10 batches of brewing right now, I would like this order to go on forever. So one thing to do it could be clicking on the hash in here and say 1, but then I'm gonna click on this green icon in here. This is the advanced settings for a work order. So right now this reads as brew drink from plant 1, one-time order. I can change this one-time order by clicking on the clock icon. So if I click once, it becomes restarts if completed, checked daily. Again, becomes checked monthly. If I click again, seasonally or yearly, and then it loops back to one-time order. Let's try and make this restarts if completed, check daily. Already, I have begun making some automation. If I exit from here and I click on my brewing station and let it go, something should happen. So you can see that a task has been created. Now a dwarf went in, but it disappeared. Alright, that's exactly what I wanted to happen, because I need to tell you this. While the workshop itself would notify you immediately that something is wrong, for example, in here if I look at brew drink from plant, it says in red, requires empty food storage item, which means either a barrel or a rock pot or something, the work order screen doesn't tell you that. Why? Because you may want to queue up your work orders before you even begin making your barrels. So, as I was saying, really powerful, but can get pretty complicated. Now, as the task was rejected, we also got a notification here saying, Adil, the bookkeeper, cancels brew drink from plant, they need empty food storage item. Has something happened to our work order? No, actually the work order is still deemed valid and it will still try to queue up a task every day. So, if I open this again and let some time pass, look at here, it's now the 13th of Galena in the calendar. Now it's the 14th and immediately a task was added and then was rejected because again, another dwarf this time, our broker, tried to make some drinks, but they cancelled this saying needs empty food storage item. So the work order stays there, it's still a valid work order, but there's a problem. We are not accounting for the fact that we don't just need plants, we also need barrels. Okay, at this point I will spend less time explaining and I will just show you something that you can do really early on to ensure that you have always drinks on hand. So let me delete this and let me say something else first. Make sure you have a functioning farm, because there is actually no way to make sure that you have plump helmets available or any other brewable plant available through the work orders menu. That is something that you need to set up through either farm plots or by periodically sending people out to scavenge for plants on the surface. Then, assuming you have plants and wood, you can do the following. Get in the work orders tab, click on create new work order and look for wooden barrels. Click on the wooden barrel. I will input now a fairly low number that represents the fact that I only have a population of 13. I don't really need 1,000 drinks at hand, okay? So I will write in here, make 7 wooden barrels, but when and why? So click on the green icon and I will say, this is not a one-time order, click on the clock icon until it says checked daily, and now I'm gonna add some conditions. So I don't want just every day 7 barrels to be made regardless. I'm gonna look in here at suggested conditions, and I'm gonna look at this. Amount of empty barrels available is less than some number. That sounds right. I'm gonna click on this, but I'm gonna change the number. And I'm gonna say, if the available number of empty barrels is less than, let's say, 2. What does this mean? It means that every day the manager will check for these conditions. So they will look in the stocks and see if the amount of empty barrels available is less than 2. This message in green is saying that this condition is satisfied for the next check, which means that the next time the manager is going to come here and check, he is going to find that indeed the number of empty barrels available is less than 2, because, spoilers, we have none at the moment. So, if all the conditions are green, the manager will dispatch the tasks in the appropriate workshops. If I wanted, I could add more conditions. For example, if I don't want to get spammed with messages for a job being cancelled for reasons such as, well, we don't have even logs available, I could add this other condition for the amount of logs. And this could be if the amount of logs available in the entire fortress is greater, so it's more than 25 or something like that, it means that we can start making 7 wooden barrels. Alright, and this should take care of the production of barrels. I will now right-click in here, and I will click again on Create a new work order. Now I'm going to jump into Brew drinks from plants. And I'm going to lower the number from 10 to, let's say, 5. Click on the green icon, and I'm gonna say, well, first of all, check the amount of available drinks. So only brew 5 more batches if the amount of drinks available is less than, well, 10 is pretty low, because this is now number of drinks, so this is 1-to-1 this number. I would like to get to a comfortable 120, let's say. So if it's less to 120, make 5 batches, which is 25 more. So this should allow us to oscillate back and forth around the number 120. Now, how often should you do this? Well, it really depends on how many dwarves you have. Right now, with 13 population, we can definitely allow ourselves to check monthly. Now, if I were to stop, we would get the same problem though. We are still not making sure that this task only runs when we have the barrels. So I can look again here and I can see that the last item in the suggested conditions is amount of empty food storage item. Now this is just a really generic way of saying barrels. The reason is an empty food storage item is either a barrel or a stone pot or a metal pot or a glazed jug. So I can click on this and then I can say, well, I'm trying to do a batch of 5 drinks, so I should set this to amount of empty food storage items is at least 5. So how do I do that? I change the number and I type 5 and enter, and then I can click repeatedly on this green icon here and see the purple condition change. Right now it says greater than. If I click, it says less than 5. That's not what I want. Exactly 5 can be useful in some situation, but again, if there's 6, we don't want to stop. Then we have not at least. This is what we want. So this now reads, brew 5 batches of drinks if the total amount of drinks available is less than 120, and if empty food storage items available is at least 5. And as you can see, this is not satisfied for the next check because we still have 0 barrels available. Now I could stop in here, and assuming my farms work correctly, this will go on forever. If again, I don't want to get interrupted or I don't want to see on the left side of the screen those notifications for jobs being cancelled, I could even go as far as to add a third item in here, which is amount of unrotten fermentable plants. If I click on this, again, these are really generic definitions. Unrotten fermentable plants means plants that can be fermented into drinks and are not rotten. And again, this number should be at least 5 because 5 is the number of batches that we are trying to create with this task. So again, let's click in here and say 5 and then change this until it says at least 5. This is satisfied for the next check. It must mean that we have at least 5 plants usable for this. So I can now right click and exit back to the list of all the work orders. A little note on the icons in here. Right now, both these orders have a yellow icon with 3 dots. That means that before anything can happen, the manager needs to assess all the conditions. It means the conditions need checking. So what I need to do now is right click, and I might also take a look at our manager, which is also our expedition leader. So let's look at them, let's follow them. They are currently sleeping, but as soon as they get up, they can start checking on these things. So right now it says no job. Okay, they are in their office, and I think they might have been so fast. Yes, orders have been validated already. Not only that, but somebody apparently already made a few barrels. So let's look at these icons again. A green icon in here means that this work order is active. A clock icon in here means that this work order is waiting to be scheduled in the next period. Now we set this to monthly, which means that the brew drink from plant activity will start at the turn of the month if all the conditions are satisfied. And right now, the amount of barrels or empty food storage items, it's still lower than 5. So let's actually go back upstairs and watch our dwarves work. Looks like they have been using all our carpenters' workshops in here, which is nice. All right. And as you can see in here, now we have several barrels and we get a notification saying make wooden barrel 7 has been completed. Let's check again in here. As you can see now, it reverted back to a yellow icon, means this needs checking. If I click on the green icon here, so that we can check back on the conditions we have set for this, we have that the first condition says not satisfied for the next check. This was the amount of empty barrels available is less than 2. This is not true anymore because we have several available. So there is no need to produce more barrels if the amount of empty barrels available is not lower than 2. That's exactly what I wanted. So even though we wait some time maybe and we let a few days pass, for example, now it's still the 18th of Galena, now is the 19th, and I take a look again, this work order is still paused. It will not produce more barrels until the number of empty barrels becomes lower than 2. So that's useful automation. Now, just because I don't want to wait for the turn of the month, I will go ahead in the brew drink from plant and change the frequency from monthly to daily. I just need to make sure that this doesn't say one-time order, because a one-time order is checked once and then it disappears. So I need to click again and until it says restarts if completed, conditions checked daily. So if I click out of that now and let it go for a second, there it is. The manager has apparently noticed that this task has higher priority or should check at a much higher frequency, and right now it's available, it's working, it's doing its thing. Again, let's reiterate why. So brew drink from plant now has a green icon. It means that it is running, it is active. If we look inside, all the checks are satisfied. So amount of available drinks at the moment is less than 120, and that is true because it's currently at 38. Amount of empty food storage items is at least 5 because we just made 7. And the amount of unrottable fermentable plants, aka plump helmets and such, is at least 5 because our farm plots have been running all the time. So let's just wait a little bit and watch the number of drinks go up. Alright, let's stop for a second. Look at this. Brew drink from plants 5 has been completed. Good stuff. Now the number of drinks is roughly 120. Let's ask our bookkeeper for a second to actually count all the drinks. So let's set it to 3 and then let's wait a few seconds so that the bookkeeper can make all counts accurate. There it is, so now we know that it's 117. This means that since this is still lower than 120, brew drinks from plant will restart at the earliest convenience. There's only one problem with the work orders that I've set up in here, and it's the following. We currently have 3 empty barrels. This means that none of the work orders will start. Why? Let's do some troubleshooting. Make wooden barrels says, well, I'll make 7 more if the number of available is less than 2, but we currently have 3. And this other work orders will say, well, I'm not gonna make 5 more batches of drinks if the amount of barrels or empty food storage item is not at least 5. So how do we fix it? Since the actual required number of barrels is 5, we can go in the make wooden barrel and say, well, if the amount available is less than 5, make 7 more. So now that I exit, I can wait a little bit for the manager to realize that we changed the numbers in the work order. And there they are, the dwarves are coming in and making 7 more wooden barrels. Okay, right now we have, let's see, a wooden barrel in here and 4 in here, so we do have at least 5 wooden barrels at the moment. Let's take a look in here. The manager still did not have a chance to check on this, but if I unpause and take a look at the still, the manager should realize that the number of drinks available is still not 120, but we do have at least 5 barrels. And there it is, brew drink from plant just automatically became active. Then I will expect that at the end of this batch, the number of drinks will be higher than 120, which means that the entire thing will go on pause, because until the number of drinks goes again below 120, nobody will consume the barrels, well, at least for the purpose of making drinks, and so we will not even produce more barrels. So, this is just one way, honestly, the simplest way that I could think of automating the production of drinks in your fortress. There's just one more thing I want to tell you before the end of this episode, and it's the following. You can, if you wish, create a work order that is specific to one workshop only. And you do that really simply by clicking on a workshop and clicking on the Work Orders tab. From here, you can create a new work order. This work order will also become available on the main work orders screen. The only difference between generic work orders and a work order that you create from a specific workshop's interface is that the latter will only ever be queued in this specific workshop, of course. So if I were to add one in here, for example, for, I don't know, rock blocks to be made, and I can even go and customize this. No, 58 is a lot. I want to write 50. I want to write 5, and then click in here and say, check monthly. Yes, every month makes 5. As I right click, I'm back in here in the common list of work orders, but in here it says, this has been queued at the Stoneworkers workshop. And this is the actual name. Let me show you. If I get back in here and I customize the name, this is my workshop now. If I now open the workshop, the work order list again, this says make rock blocks, only affects my workshop, okay? This is one way in which, if you want, you can have a specific workshop dedicated to doing only one thing. And you can even get in here and say, well, since I have a specific work order assigned to my workshop, I will go ahead and say that 0 general work orders will be assigned to this one, which means that if I create another work order for, I don't know, rock tables, from here it will never affect this one, but only these other two. As always, if you have questions and comments, feel free to write in the comments below. I also want to take this opportunity to thank you all. This series has been doing wonders for my really tiny channel, and Dwarf Fortress in general, if I think of all the content that I began producing for Dwarf Fortress since more or less a month ago, this probably accounts for 250 new subscribers. So to all of you, and also to all the people that stuck with me from before and are now appreciating this amazing game, I want to say thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next episode. Alla prossima!